colleagues introduce herself as well.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Again, thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Sandy DiCarlo. I am also a PATH counselor, and I work with Danica on the USF St. Petersburg campus.
So for this evening, we'll be talking about a variety of topics. The first thing that we'll talk about is college types and fits, which is basically understanding what are the different types of colleges that are available to you, as well as more information about how do you make the decision that is best for you. Then we'll go into standardized testing, where we'll talk a little bit about the ACT and the SAT test. After that, there will be some time to ask questions about both of those topics. So if you want to get into a little bit more detail about your individual experience, this is a great time to do so. You can either add your questions in the chat as our guest speakers are talking, or once this time arrives, you can turn on your mic and ask that question. Next, we'll go into some scholarship information to understand what are the scholarships that are currently available to juniors, as well as the scholarships that will be available to you next school year. Then there will be more time to ask more questions, and then we'll follow that up with information about the PATH program, which is who are we, you some things that you can do either as a junior right now or as the parent of a junior. So I am going to turn it over to Charlotte Finnicle, who will be telling us a little bit about college types and fit.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Charlotte Finnicle. I am a senior at St. Petersburg College, and I am also a former PATH intern, so it's great to be working with PATH again. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, make sure you all can see it. Let's see. Oh, they updated it. That is interesting. Okay. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. All right, so college type and fit. So let's dive into this topic a bit more. So we're going to first start by talking about why college. So specifically, also I'm going to give you all a quick friendly reminder. If you can, please mute your devices just so there's not any, overlap or anything like that.
I'm right. Let me go in here.
Okay, so earnings and unemployment rates by educational attainment. So you might be thinking, why college? There are definitely jobs you can get right after high school, but there are some advantages to going to college. So as you can see here, there's different levels of education and different weekly earnings. So let's say if you're in high school and you're working part-time right now, you might be bringing home like $200 a week. This is how much you would make as you continue in your education, which, as you can see, it gets pretty impressive, $1,800 a week isn't bad, and honestly, $1,300 a week isn't bad. But it's also important to consider the unemployment rate, because job stability is another really important thing you want to factor into as well. It'll save you a lot of headaches down the road. And as you can see, as you continue in your education, that unemployment rate gets smaller, which is always great. So let's talk about some of the terminology, specifically post-secondary education. When we talk about post-secondary education, we're not talking just specifically about SPC or USF. We are talking about any education that is attained after high school. So that can be as simple as a 3-month program at Pinellas Technical College, or it could be a doctorate degree. So it really all varies, but we're going to talk about each one of those, kind of talk about the different programs they offer, and talk about figuring out what is the best fit for you. So specifically, what we'll be looking over today is these three in purple. We'll talk about vocational/technical school, community college, and university. There are also options like enlisting in the U.S. Armed Forces or employment in the U.S. workforce, but because we're a college access program, we're going to be talking specifically about these. So vocational/technical school, this is typically going to be like the shortest amount of time when it comes to education, anything from 3 to 14 months. And it's typically specialized training that will lead you to a particular career. Now, there's a wide variety of different programs in these technical schools. I think sometimes when people think technical school, they think like welding, like, oh, you're going to become a welder. There's a big variety, and it can all be catered to your interests. Some of the programs include things like automotive technology. So if you like working with cars, cosmetology, if you're more creative, or surgical technology if you want to work in health. There are different options for you within this program that you can, cater to your own interests. And that's going to be a running theme throughout all these different options. Now, community college. Community college, we're going to talk particularly about a 2-year associate's degree. Now, there are different kinds of associate degrees. There is the Associate of Arts and the Associate of Science. Associate of Arts is a 2-year degree that prepares you to transfer to a 4-year program. This can typically be done to, transfer to a university like USF, but it can also transfer to some bachelor's programs that SBC has, which is what I did. Now, there's also the Associate of Science. You can kind of view that as like a longer version of the technical program. It will focus on preparing you for a certain career, and in the same vein, you can kind of focus it to what you want to study. So there's things like dental hygiene or business, or there's even music industry and recording arts at St. Petersburg College, which I think is really cool and fun. But your local option for community college is St. Petersburg College, and not to be biased, but it's a pretty nice school. All right. University. So this is kind of like the stereotypical thing you'll see in the movies when you think of college. This is 4 years that will lead to a bachelor's degree is what people typically get. And there's different options for majors and even minors and different fields of study for your bachelor's degree. But you can also go on to earn a master's, which is 2 years after your bachelor's degree, or a doctoral, which is 4. So this is going to be like a wide variety of options. And depending on what jobs you'd want to pursue, they might require a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree. Now, let's talk about college fit considerations. Now that you understand the different types, it's important to think about what works best for you, because there's no right answer. What works great for you will be a terrible option for someone else, and vice versa. So ultimately, just working on self-reflection, and we're going to talk about a couple factors that will help with that self-reflection. Okay, so location. So let's say you are going away to college. You want to think about rural versus urban destinations, if you want to stay in-state versus out-of-state. Now, there are some additional considerations with that, which I will get into in a second. And then weather/climate. Funny enough, I'm actually working on getting into graduate school, and every single place I have applied to has snow to some degree, because I am one of those people who loves that terrible weather that is just so cold. But that's my personal preference. So yeah. And then distance from home. Some people can be 30 minutes away from home and feel like they're, on their own, and it's a big journey. And then other people are like, no, I want to be like 1 or 2 hours away and explore a new city. So again, personal preference. All right, finances. Personally, I think this is the most important factor when considering. So there's a couple other things there's a couple little sub considerations, if that makes sense. We're going to talk about cost of attendance. That's going to be like the tag price for the school. That's going to be the tuition, the dorm price, stuff like that. Now, keep in mind that might not be what you're paying at the end. There are often scholarship opportunities or financial aid that impact what you'll actually be paying. And then there's cost of living. That can be things, obviously, like your dorm, your meal plan, stuff like that. But it's also smaller things like gas prices and new clothes you might need and stuff like that. On-campus versus off-campus housing. On campus, obviously going to be dorms. Off-campus, that can either be, living at home and commuting to school, or it could be having an apartment. So that's another financial factor you would want to consider. But there are also opportunities to earn money while you're in school. So there's federal work study and campus job opportunities. They're both similar things. They're part-time jobs on campus. Federal work study, however, you will have to qualify through Fafsa. So that's another important reason to fill out Fafsa is for those opportunities. But these I highly recommend compared to working a job off campus, because they'll recognize that you're a student first and that you need to be able to have time off for class, time to study. And so they won't, push you to your limits, which is really good. Now, the school's funding type, specifically going back to in-state versus out-of-state. In-state tuition is cheaper because the taxes from the state kind of subsidize some of the tuition and offset the cost. So that's why in-state tuition for a university in Florida would be maybe $5,000 versus out-of-state tuition might be like $20,000. So it definitely varies a great deal. And then scholarship opportunities. Honestly, one of the best things you can do is Google whatever school you're interested in and add scholarships or freshman scholarships specifically. And a lot of times they'll have a big graph of what GPA you need and what SAT/ACT scores you need to get a certain amount of the scholarship. So that's a great way to consider the offset of the cost of attendance. All right. Oh, so I moved backwards. Academics. Obviously, you do not want to go to a school that doesn't have your major. If I wanted to study marine science and I thought to myself, well, I'm going to move to Nebraska and do that, I would go to a university in Nebraska and they would probably laugh in my face when I signed up. So it's always make sure to good to consider what programs are offered by your college. And sometimes different programs will specialize in different things. Like two colleges might offer the same programs, but one might be really strong at one program and one might be really strong at a different program. So it's worth considering that as well. Faculty and staff, you want to make sure the people working at the college are dedicated to making sure you have a good time in college, learn your most, and succeed. And then accreditation, of course, you want to make sure your college is accredited. SPC, USF, and PTech are all accredited, which is great. Student to teacher ratio, if you do not like to be in a lecture hall that looks like a tiny concert, then that might not be the best option for you. I know from personal experience, SBC has classes that range from about 10 to 30 students, which is a really nice size if you want to like know your professor personally and kind of be on a first name basis with them, which is great. And then enrollment. Do you want to be at a large school, a small school? This can even impact what campus you end up. So if you want a small school, you can still go to USF and go somewhere like USF St. Petersburg, which will be a bit smaller than USF Tampa. So there's plenty of options with that. Now, campus environment. This is kind of a similar factor, but every campus has like their own personality. Even if you compare the different campuses at USF, they kind of have their own different activities, their own different, residence halls, dining halls, stuff like that. Safety is an important consideration. Again, going back to USF St. Pete, I know they kind of have a thing going where they have these blue poles with phones in them that call campus security. And their goal is to make sure that students can see too at all times from wherever they are on campus. So that's just great for, a peace of mind and stuff like that. Then, of course, extracurricular activities, which is kind of like the personality of the campus. If you're interested in certain clubs, you can always Google it, and they will most likely be listed online. Some colleges, if they're big enough, they will have like major events like concerts, stuff like that. Greek life, if that's something you're interested in pursuing, not every college has that, so it's good to look into that. And then if you want to watch like a football game on campus, you definitely want to go to a college that has a football team. And intramural is also a great opportunity. Just have fun and play with friends. So yeah. Okay, other factors. So it's important to consider different statistics. You want to look into acceptance rates, transfer rates, retention and graduation. Will they help you complete your degree? And job placement. Will they help you get a job afterwards? And then, of course, available resources and support systems such as career services, libraries, research opportunities if that's of interest to you, and special accommodations. I believe every college is required to have an accessibility office on campus, but it's always good to just touch base, make sure it's something that you would really benefit from. And then, of course, diversity. So there's different acronyms we can work through. PWI stands for predominantly white institution. HBCU stands for historically Black colleges and universities, and there are others similar to that. There's also some with religious affiliations, which is something you might want to consider if that's applicable to you. And then gender. I know there are women's colleges across the country, so that's a nice variety. And if that's something you're interested in, you definitely have your pick. Okay, so how to explore each of these schools? Now that you know what to look for, how are you going to find the information? So first of all, I highly recommend campus tours. I personally think they're super fun. I might be biased because I'm a little bit of a nerd, but they're almost always free. Sometimes they'll give you free t-shirts, and it's just a really good way to get a feel for the campus and kind of just see if you can picture yourself there, which is great. Admissions representatives. A lot of people think they are bugging their admissions representatives. They are not. It is their job to listen to every single one of your questions, even if they're like 200 questions, and answer them and help make sure you're making the right decision. You can call or email them, and again, you would just search like USF admissions representatives, and they would almost always have a page there. And then students. If you know someone like a friend or a friend's brother or a friend's neighbor's dog who went to a school you're interested in, you're going to want to reach out and ask them some questions. Everyone's going to be interested in talking about their college. Whether they've had good or bad experiences, they will tell you all about it. Now, I will say, I personally think it's important to take this with a grain of salt. Some people have the best time in college, some people have the worst time. So while it's good to get insight, just make sure that it won't always determine your college experience. And then, of course, the internet. I have been saying it time and time again, but the internet is a wealth of information, pretty much almost anything you'd want to know about a college. You can pretty much find it on their website, which is great. And then you have different organizations like Florida Shines, Florida Department of Education. They have...
All right, bye.
Okay, yeah, so they have all these different resources that will help you kind of like, it's like a database of different schools, so that's a really great place to start. And lastly, everyone is different. I said this earlier, but ultimately, it all really depends on like what your needs are. There's no correct answer to making a college plan. Ultimately, you want to do what's best for you, and it's important to talk about it with your family as well, because while it is definitely your decision, your family might have different ideas of what you want versus what they want. So it's good to be open and honest and start having these discussions now. And also, college is supposed to be somewhat fun now. You know, this is the exciting time. It's junior year. You get to look at colleges and decide what's the best fit for you. All right, so that's pretty much it for my presentation. I'll stop sharing my screen. Okay.
Thank you, Charlotte, for that information. We really appreciate you going over the different types of institutions that are available to our students, as well as some of the characteristics that they should consider when they are doing their research. So next, we're going to turn it over to Debbie Weaver, who's going to talk to us a little bit about college entrance exams. And then once we make it through her portion, we will be accepting questions that you may have about both choosing a college as well as the different tests that may be required for college admissions.
Awesome. Hi. I'm going to share my screen before I get into anything further so that I can make sure we are all on the same page. Oh, well, let's see. I think I made it all the way to one part. Now I got to actually click share. All right, there we go. So everyone should hopefully now see the demystifying the SAT, ACT. Wanted to just give you this tiniest little background, and that is that I own a tutoring company where really like 90% of our day is all focused on SAT and ACT support, improving the scores, making sure that we can get students as much money as possible to pay for college. Because truly that is the big takeaway here is when your students already have such high GPAs, why leave any money on the table if you're planning to go to a state of Florida school or even out of state? There are scholarships to be had. So you want to make sure that you give them all of the quantitative data that they need, which would be GPA being stellar and SAT, ACT scores being awesome. So let me share with you, why do these things matter so much? Because when you're getting applications for a lot of different schools, these schools like UF, USF, FSU, UCF, they're looking at 40,000 plus applicants trying to get into their freshman spots. And for example, the UF numbers for last year were about 41,000 and they only could choose about 6,500. So of all of these thousands and thousands of applications, how do they narrow it down to only 6,500 who are going to get the letter that says you're in, we want you? So you want to be able to up your odds. And the way that you can do that is to have really strong scores that make you stand out. So the other big reason is for scholarship opportunities, there are very specific parameters to get, for example, Florida Academic Scholars, which is the Bright Futures Scholarship. The 100% Bright Future Scholarship, we're going to talk about this much later, I think, in the presentation, but it is a 3.5 weighted GPA and a 29 on the ACT or a 1330 on the SAT, and volunteer hours, of course. And then to get the Medallion Scholarship, which is still 75% of college tuition paid. Phenomenal. So this is considered like the lower of the two, and yet 75% of your college tuition paid is an incredible amount of money. 3.0 GPA and an ACT of 25 or an SAT of 1210. So if you're looking at these numbers of going, how in the world do I get my ACT score up to a 25 or 29? Or how do I elevate an SAT to a 1210 or 1330? The one thing that is probably part of your way of thinking right now is that these tests are hard. And what you really need to think about is that standardized tests, while yes, they have to use content that is going to be somehow like indicative of the type of work you're going to do in college, at the same time, they know that you're a high school student, or that if you're a parent on this, that your kid is a high school student. And it has to go over things that they have had exposure to and that they will be able to master. The most important thing, though, that where you have to change your thinking is you have to understand standardized tests mean predictable tests. And predictable tests will get you money because predictable tests have a formula. And when you have a test where you can look at it and say, oh, this is a classic SAT question that focuses on ratios. I know how to untangle a question about ratios because I've done the prep. I've seen a number of questions from SAT. I know what to do, and I know an attack strategy. By knowing the strategies and by knowing the formulas, you're really going to take this predictable test and make it predictable for your mind. So on test day, you look at the questions and go, oh, thanks SAT or thanks ACT. I can clearly see that that's like a common way that you ask this question, and I know exactly what to do with this. So I hear from students all the time, we'll be working on a question and they'll say, is that really on an SAT or is that really on an ACT? And I'm like, yes, we only use real problems in our prep when we're working with students so we can show them and prove to them. We're not just like giving you easy questions to try to make you feel confident. We're showing you real SAT and ACT questions. So to that end, let me actually prove to you with the challenge. These are the type of questions that your students will see on the SAT, or if you are again a student, you'll see them. And this would be a problem that is actually shown on a real SAT writing section, which is grammar. And they love to ask questions about the difference between commas, semicolons, colons, and periods. Now, if you know the rules of grammar, you're going to instantly look at this and say, huh, well, I know that for a semicolon to work, I definitely am going to need a full sentence before it. When you look at this, to counter the rise of fast food and fast life, that's a fragment. That's not a full sentence. And I would know that with a colon, I also have to have a full sentence in front. Then I would know that one's out. And with a period, I would have to also. So like just right there, I could eliminate B, C, and D. But also something that you have to know about the test. So while that's pretty cool, I could like drive you to A immediately with that knowledge. If you know that a semicolon and a period are tested equally, like they are the same to an SAT or ACT, then what they just gave you with letter B and letter D is they gave you a gift. You can actually cross off B and D because you can't have two right answers on the SAT or ACT. And this is something that helps out students tremendously. So just by knowing that a semicolon and a period work the same on the SAT and ACT, because they do. So full sentence followed by another full sentence. You can cross off B and D. Now, even if you just rolled the dice or flipped a coin and picked between A and C, your odds are already automatically better. But again, knowing the next rule, and that is that a colon does have to have a complete sentence in front, or knowing that a comma loves fragments. Look at this little fragment. To counter the rise of fast food and fast life. What? That's a fragment. We can put a comma there. That's a scene starter. So again, there's so many great ways that knowing your grammar rules can instantaneously increase your score just by knowing a couple of little tricks. Knowing this and knowing a couple other things, like for example, when I'm looking at number 21, I can tell you automatically, without a doubt, letter D is my correct answer. And the way that I know this is that I've done enough SAT and ACTs to know that the way they test transition words like nevertheless, similarly, still, is if they were testing me on transition words, they would have given me 4 transition words. They were not testing on transitions. They wanted you to choose shortest answer, no transition necessary, and that is 100%. It works every single time. Every single SAT and ACT out there, if you see 3 transition words and 1 without, choose the one without. That's how the test works. It's a predictable, very formulaic exam. And this is true for SAT and ACT. So then we look at this next one. We've got the same 4 words are in all 4 of our answer choices. Officials of the value, officials of the value. The only difference, if you notice, is that they've got commas in different places. They also have one in this situation where there is no punctuation at all. And again, when you know something about the test maker loves actually the answer choice that has no punctuation. Now, is it a 100% rule like what we just did? Like I can tell you, this will always be the one with no transition. Will it always be no punctuation? No, but you should lean that way. So understanding which way to lean and which direction to kind of lean toward on test day, that's a huge part of saving time, getting to the right answer faster. So in this case, we're going to lean toward H and we're going to try H first. And it says, These tests convince the officials of the value of using the Navajo language in a code. Yeah, that's great. We don't need any sort of breath. We don't need a pause. We're just going to go with H. And we all already do know that the ACT loves that, and SAT as well. So we're going to be good to go. So again, just knowing a few things about how the test maker works makes it so much easier. So now, if you're sitting here looking at this with me, I hope you're noticing for number 25, we do have a little bit of a question before the answers. So we do have to check on this one first. And it says, which of the following alternatives to the underlined portion would not be acceptable? So actually, we're looking for a bonkers, stupid sounding sentence. We don't want a correct sounding sentence. We want a incorrect, grammatically false answer. We also are going to look at our answer choices though. And if you notice, A and C follows that little gift that I talked to you about earlier. Semicolon and period, and all the words are the same. Rare, semicolon this, rare, period this. We can cross those out. That's as basically as if the answer were apple or dog or dog. Same answer, get rid of it. So now we're between B and D. And if we go with like kind of putting in the shortest answer that kind of looks like a run-on, let's try that first. Outside Navajo communities, comma, such exposure is rare. This greatly contributed to its success. Ooh, terrible. That would be a run-on sentence. We need a breath there or a pause. So B is actually our correct answer. All right, and then the last one, this is another 100% rule. When you look at a question on the ACT or SAT that has 3 pronouns, pronouns are things that take the place of a noun. They tend to be a little bit more vague, like it's, that, this. Then you've got an answer like the Navajo code. That's super specific. It gives a better clarity. We have no ambiguity about what the sentence is talking about. So we are actually going to go with Navajo code because that is called an ambiguous pronoun question. It will 100% of the time be the most specific noun. All right, isn't that cool? So again, just knowing a few things. And by the way, these are just 4 or 5 questions that I've had a chance to show you of a few things, but we go over like 60 to 70 different grammar tricks. And when I say tricks, it's knowing your stuff, right? You have to know how a comma works and know how a colon works. But when you do, and you combine that with knowing the test, it's magic. Like it almost makes the questions come off the page. And this is what we hear from students constantly who said, I used to feel like the ACT or SAT was so scary. And now the answers practically like come off the page at me. So let's talk about math. So math, same thing. There are ways that for sure you have to know your math, but also there are ways that knowing a few tricks with like picking numbers or back solving and things like that can be really, really effective. So if we have a question like this that says in the equation, ax plus 3 squared equals 36, a is a constant. If x equals -3 is one solution to this equation, what is the possible value of a? I always tell my students to go ahead and feel overwhelmed by it at first. Feel like, oh, all of these equations and numbers and variables. But then when you just kind of relax for a second and you're like, okay, so I've got this equation. I know what x is, and I'm just looking for a. I'm just going to be able to solve for it. So the very first thing to do, let's at least put in the one variable that we know. So we know that x is -3, and that's already going to help us. And then we're going to start by picking numbers, because in this case, all we have to do is put something in here for a and see if it works. So when you're picking numbers, you only can pick numbers, or you only should, if it's whole numbers. So we've got -11, -5, -1, and 0. Those are all whole numbers. We can try this out. We want to start with B or C, because then with whatever our answer is, if we don't like it, we know if we need to go lower or higher. So in this case, -5, if we put this in, we would have -5 times -3 is a +15, and a +15 plus 3 is a +18 squared. Woo, big, big, big number, much bigger than 36. So we know then that that's going to be too big. So definitely putting in a -11 in here is going to make it even more ginormous. So let's try, in this case, 0 was one that you might notice I just immediately took that out of the running, because when you put a 0 in for here, you're going to get a baby number, right? You're going to get only 3 squared, and that's too small. But -1 works perfectly. So, but by eliminating these two first, it made it very easy to get down to those last two. And then dealing with -1 and 0 is actually a really easy place to work. The other thing is that when you are looking at picking numbers, we actually could have started with -1 or 0, because they are really easy numbers to work with. So that's another attack strategy that you can use. But in any case, in most cases, you're only going to have to solve at maximum 2 equations, or sometimes you just get it, you nail it right in the very beginning. Then when you have problems like this on the math section where you have to know a little bit about geometry and the basics, really the SAT and ACT want to make sure that you know that all of the interior angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees. They want to make sure that you know that a straight line is also 180 degrees. So again, when you get a question like this with all this information in the front, let's at least just get down to the question at hand. The question here is, what is the measure in degrees of angle QMR? QMR, we're looking at this little angle right here. So we need to keep in mind, what do we know? We know a straight line is 180. Because of that, we know that this angle has to be 120, because 120 plus 60 would give us our straight line right here. Well, that's going to be really helpful because we're trying to find the interior angles here. We're trying to find this little guy right there. And so if we're trying to find this one, and we know this is 120, we can also see that this is an isosceles triangle where we have two sides that are the same, which means our two angles are the same. So all we have to do is say, well, 120 from 180 is 60. And if we divide that by 2, it'll give us 30 for each of those angles. Oh, I went too fast. And that's how quick and easy it can be when you just go back to the basics. What is a straight line? What are the interior angles of a triangle? And again, sometimes students will say, it's just been so long. I haven't done geometry in a number of years. If they're a junior, they may not have done geometry since they were a freshman, or maybe last year. Pre-algebra, algebra 1, geometry, and algebra 2. Those are really the 4 things that these tests really, really test. On the ACT, there are a few problems on the math where they do like matrices or a few like trigonometry questions, but we're talking like 1 or 2. The majority of the test is from pre-algebra to algebra 2. And again, it's just been a long time for some students since they've done pre-algebra, algebra 1, and geometry. So refreshing their memory on some of these things will, again, illuminate the problem. They'll be like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot that. Yeah, that's basic. And by doing so, you get down to the basics, which is SAT and ACT truly are just trying to make sure you know that foundational knowledge and then apply it in a critical thinking way. So once you do learn these strategies, you start to think like the test makers, the answers do seem to almost like float off the page at you. There are a number of ways you can prep. Students can absolutely prep on their own. I want you to fully understand and know that I support students trying to get as much free test prep as possible. There are so many free online resources. Khan Academy is actually, they are in cahoots with the College Board, which is the team that makes the SAT. So obviously, if you're prepping for the SAT and you've not gone on Khan Academy, that's crazy. Go and look at some of those free resources that Khan Academy has. YouTube is filled with lots of really great resources, especially this. If you're taking notes, I would write this down. Looking at the real SAT tests that have been released, which by the way, you can just put in real released SAT tests, and you'll find like 10 of them that immediately pop up. And you know why? Because they're on the College Board SAT website. They give them to you. They give them to you with the answers and explanations. And if you go on YouTube, you can actually find test prep teams, kind of like what I do, who have made videos of every single question and how to work through it. So if you or your student are not really like, I don't really want to read the explanation, so I want to hear it, go to YouTube and you can say like, okay, SAT test 1, I want to look at those explanations for math. It'll give you a great video for that. There are also resources at your own school. Like sometimes they do test prep at your school. Awesome. Jump in on everything you can possibly get that's free. Then you might say like, well, why would I even want to work with an official test prep company then? And the answer to that would be, it is our day job. So since it's my day job to know these tests inside and out, and I've worked through every single release test, I know every little tip and trick, it's going to be easier for me to know and relay that information to you than to someone who maybe is like a teacher at a school and has the best heart and they really, really want to help you, but they honestly themselves haven't taken the SAT in a long time. They're just kind of looking at some of the resources they've been given and they're trying their best to give you some tips and tricks. But again, it's not their day job. Their focus is on a lot of other things. And sometimes we do get students who have done some of the prep that's been given to them for free at school. And we're like, you know, maybe let's not use that strategy. Let's focus on these. So again, I cannot speak for how test prep is done on your campus for your, you know, at your school, but I can definitely tell you that people who do this for their day job, we get results. We're not going to have you going through our program and not get results, because we know what sort of ways to fine tune and move things around. The struggles that you would have if you're someone who's like, you know, maybe you've even been through some test prep and you haven't seen gains. It is difficult for us if you have like severe test anxiety, or you have ADHD, or something that maybe like you have a processing disorder that holds you back. You want to make sure you get as many accommodations as you are eligible, for which you are eligible. Because I work with students who are even on like 504 plans and they get extended time on tests at school, but they forget that they can ask for that on the SAT. No, do it. They will sometimes give you double time, or at least time and a half, to take your test if you have any of those pre-existing conditions where you can prove that, like, no, I'm prescribed medication for this. This is a true thing that holds me back, and they will usually give you extra time. So try to make sure that you qualify for all of the things you can, because no doubt about it, with these tests, the one thing that people say is, you know, the biggest thing that's hard for them to get over is the timing, because you are given just a set amount of time. So it's kind of unfair when parents sometimes will say to their kid, I don't get it. Like, you get straight A's in school, but how can you not pass these tests? Remember, your student in school can usually get extra time. They can come back in at lunch. They can stay after school. They can finish their tests. They can turn in their homework, you know, late and still get some credit. SAT or ACT, that's it. You were there for that 4-hour period, and that is it. When they say pencils down, they mean down, done. So if they only get through half the test, and that's the timing issues, then you really need to make sure that they're empowered with strategies to help them move more quickly and confidently through every question so they can finish and have a score that reflects their abilities as a student. So lots of great things. The last thing that I'll leave you with, so we can open up into questions here, is what is like the proposed timeline? Well, for juniors, please start your junior year. Please, please, please. When I'm working with seniors or senior year, it's like, it's almost too late. We are cramming to try to get things done before the deadlines for college admissions, and it's really stressful. And you don't want your senior year to be a stressful, more stressful time. So as a junior, if you have already taken Algebra 2, that's really a good indicator of when you need to start prep as soon as you're finished with Algebra 2. If you're in Algebra 2 as we speak, then try to get into a test prep course, like maybe in the spring when you're getting closer to finishing Algebra 2, because no doubt about it, there's a ton of Algebra 2 on these tests. But if you can start like right now and start prepping for the December SAT and ACT, the February ACT, the March SAT, you're going to be ahead of the game. And I can also tell you that schools in your area, they do, so like Osceola Fundamental High School, Seminole High, Largo High, most of the private schools as well, they give the SAT for free in March to every single junior. All juniors will take and sit for the SAT, and it will be one that counts towards college admissions. So that's great. I mean, you're getting this great opportunity from the school, so you want to be prepared for it by making sure to get some prep in. So if the answer to this question is you've already done Algebra 2, start prep ASAP. Find your plan. Start looking online, call me, whatever, like figure out a plan. Then you want to test in either October, November, December, or again, February, March, April. And then, yay, you get your scores and you're done. You want to be done before the end of your junior year. That would be fabulous. So then you can focus on your college essay and your applications. If you've not taken Algebra 2, start prepping in like January, February, or maybe even if you want to wait till Algebra 2 is almost done, like April. If you start prepping in say like April or say March, April, you could test in May and June. And then worst case, if you need to retest, you still have July, August through the fall if you need to as well. So again, you have lots of different options. The best thing to do, seniors, just start now, immediately. Go, 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 go. You're running out of time. So that would just be my answer to seniors. Test prep will get you results. On average, we see average score increases of 150 points on the SAT and 4 points, which by the way, 4 points is like equivalent to 150 on the SAT. This is huge gains. And this is, we're talking about this average in about 8 to 10 weeks of prep. So what I do not want to try to tell you is that, oh yeah, you can just prep over a weekend, you know, no, this is like the World Series of academics. Okay. You don't just pick up a bat for the first time right before test or, you know, before the big game. So for test day, you also don't want to just grab a Kaplan book or a Barron's book or a, you know, Princeton Review book and do it just that weekend before. No. Your brain is a muscle, and the muscle needs time to like think about these strategies. It's going to wrestle with them. At first, when I first introduce strategies to students, they'll say, I still want to do it the way I used to do it. I'm like, I mean, you can do it your old way, but I'm telling you, if you do it the way that I'm telling you, it will get you results. And eventually they do buy into it. The brain changes, it looks at it differently. And then boom, we not only see average increases of 150, we see huge gains. So a little junior that I just started working with over the summer, he started in like August 1st-ish. And actually for him by September, he already had a 32 on the ACT. He started at 24. He went up to a 32. So again, you don't have to just see gains of 4 points. Sometimes students see gains 7, 8 points, just even after 8 or 10 weeks. But you've got to get started and you have to give yourself enough time. Other students, I worked with one student for like 8 months. That student had a lot of processing issues, had a lot of foundational knowledge that needed to be like, I mean, we really had to go back to just the basics of how to add 2 numbers together, whether they were positive or negative numbers. So imagine, it just depends on where you start, but these are typical average gains. And again, we have lots of results from students. I can send this information out to you guys, but basically we see huge results. And so if you wanted to start working with us, we do everything online. So we do have everything through Zoom. After COVID happened, we closed down our center in Seminole and we just moved everything online. And our SAT and ACT scores have gone through the roof since moving to a fully online program because it's quieter. And the students who, they just get right out of school, they get home, they log in and it's quiet. Whereas when they came to our center, sometimes they had to compete with the other students who were learning like their alphabet and their ABCs while they're trying to like study the SAT. So that is me trying to really quickly get done by 6:45 and I did it. All right, so we're gonna open up for questions. If anybody has any questions at all, please do let us know.
We have several in the chat, but before I get to the questions, I wanted to ask if you can touch on the idea of concordant scoring and the ACT or SAT being used as a graduation requirement versus college admissions or for scholarships.
Yes. So a lot of students with whom we work, they actually come to us and they say, I can't pass the darn FSA reading. I just can't get through it. And I'm like, it's okay. We're going to see if we can get a concordant score for you through the ACT. And so, you know, basically, if you're not familiar with what that means, concordant score just means that it can replace the requirement score needed for FSA. And then by checking off that box, so I believe it's a 19 for the reading for concordant with an ACT. So like a 19 on the reading would get you out of FSA reading, don't have to take that anymore, and then your graduation requirement is fulfilled. So that's huge. So again, they do have like a breakdown of what each of the concordant scores are, and you should certainly talk to your counselor at school and find out like, I think I'm going to do some test prep and I would just like to get, you know, up to speed on this ACT and then be able to get the scores needed to just push that out of the way. Because truthfully, it's about format. With these testing, it's about format. And the way that the FSA asks questions versus the way the ACT, night and day. ACT is very straightforward and formulaic. There's no messing around. There's no games. I've seen a few FSA tests where I'm like, I'm just going to say that A or D, you know, again, standardized tests, they really need to have like a very cut and dry reason why A is right and D is wrong. That's how it is on the ACT and SAT. There is a formulaic reason why an answer is categorically right or wrong. So embrace them, use them to your advantage.
That what your requirement is for graduation may be different than what you may want to consider for when you're applying for college. So just because you need a 16 or 18 or 19 to graduate, that may not be the score you need to get the Bright Future Scholarship or to get into the university of your choice. So just be aware of the difference in those scoring requirements.
Ooh, that is so true.
Questions for you. The first question that we have is, do you have to go to an in-state Florida school to take advantage of Bright Futures?
Yes. Yep. Bright Futures is a great thing that the state of Florida does. But what's been really interesting is that as I've done work with students, now that we've moved to online, I actually work with students who go to school in New York, school in Georgia. I have a student out in California. And I found that all of these different states have kind of their own form of like a Bright Futures. They call it, I think it's called the Hope Scholarship or something in Georgia, I believe. So, if you look at what each state has, but here's the thing, the Hope Scholarship in Georgia would be for Georgia residents. So it really does come down to where your placement is. So I was working with a student, for example, who knew that her dad was going to get stationed in a new location, and they strategically did it so that her residency would be at least 1 year in that new location so that she could qualify for the scholarships that her new state would have. So, sometimes have to get really strategic, but that doesn't mean that there's not other scholarships. So with each school to which you apply, you want to always talk, I love that you said earlier, you're not bugging the admission counselors if you ask them questions. You want to ask the admission counselors at each school to which you're applying and say, hey, are there very specific scholarships for USF, for example, to which I could apply? That could be great for you because maybe you even could qualify for multiple, if you had like a local scholarship from your women's club and you had a USF scholarship for another few thousand, add all these different things together and that could cover your tuition as well. So, but Bright Futures, just Florida. Yeah.
Okay, our next question is, do you recommend that students take both the SAT and the ACT?
Yes, actually, yes. So let me think how to best start with this. Well, if there's concerns that you're like, oh, but I don't want that to be like on my record, the kind of thing, take a free practice test. So you can download a full-length free, real release SAT, and then online there actually even it'll say like online proctoring for SAT, and you can just take it like a real test and then score it and see what your score would be. If you're still like, oh, I don't know, I feel like I'm gonna mess that up, please email me. I will set you up where we do free practice tests all the time. So you would have to download the materials and print them out, but we can proctor you for free. We actually do it every Saturday and Sunday. So like, that's not a problem. And then we can grade it for you to let you know what you would get. But that way it would be a risk-free way of finding out which test is more like your test. But here's the thing. The reason I still say, like, even if you do, let's say that you take the SAT and ACT and you're like, oh, I like the SAT so much better because the ACT just seemed like too fast. Like the timing was really, really short for me and it stressed me out. There's probably not one student with whom I have helped to get phenomenal ACT scores who didn't originally tell me that they hated the ACT. They start out and they're like, oh yeah, I think I'm more of like an SAT person. I just think I like the timing better. I'm like, okay. And then like we go through the prep and I'm like, yeah, like why don't we try the ACT now? And they're like, oh, this is like no games. This is like right, it's like practically screaming the answers at you. And so I like to see the difference is that the SAT likes to whisper the answers to you. They really do. They give you lots of good clues. The ACT, if you've done prep, they are screaming the answers at you. They're like, they're trying to hand them to you. So if you just plan on taking both and prepping for both, and especially if you're working with someone who's helping you prep, we'll be able to say, you're an SAT man or you're an ACT gal or whatever, so we'll be able to help you kind of figure out which one's best for you. But I still totally, believe that once you go through prep, the prep that you do is going to help you with both tests. And that sometimes really kind of infuriates me when people's, other test prep providers are like, oh, you can only pick one and only focus on that one. Let me tell you, I've been doing this since 2003. I worked with Kaplan Test Prep for 10 years, and I know all the ins and outs of this industry. And I can absolutely tell you that, like, 90% of the prep strategies work for both tests. There's only like a tiny few that like, okay, this is only an SAT thing or this is only ACT, but like 90% of them work for both. So you're going to see an increase if you do any prep at all. So.
Okay, our next question is about the PSAT and its relation to the SAT. So the question is, how does the PSAT score relate to the SAT score? So for example, you indicated that Bright Futures 100% scholarship is a minimum of a 1330. What would be the equivalent of that on the, I'm assuming the PSAT? She asked because many juniors have already taken the PSAT, but not necessarily the SAT.
Right. So they're not exactly a 1-to-1 ratio. They're slightly, they're meant to be indicative of what you could expect on an SAT, so they're close. But sometimes PSAT scores will look a little bit higher. They're like, oh, I got a 1300 on the PSAT, but when I took my real SAT, it was like a 1210 or something like that. You know, sometimes it's a little bit lower. And that's because the PSAT is also, it's an introductory version of the SAT. So the questions are fewer. They give them a few fewer questions. So that can sometimes be easier on them. And the content can sometimes be just slightly easier. So it's a very good indicator of what success you will have on the SAT, but it's not like a 1-to-1 ratio. Why the PSAT is so important is, number one, to start building up that like familiarity so that there aren't as many issues with test anxiety. That's number one. Number two, the National Merit Scholars Program. Now, the National Merit Scholars Program it's a scholarship you can only get based on your PSAT scores. And so they have sophomores take a PSAT to sort of like, let's kind of like see how they're doing. In fact, I've heard of 7th graders and 8th graders taking this test just to kind of see how they're doing. But when you take the PSAT as a junior, and I'm guessing if you're on this call, you probably just took it like a few weeks ago, those scores are sent to a council that looks over all of the highest performers on the PSAT that were given in October of the junior year. And those people will be either invited to be finalists for the National Merit Scholars or, you know, honorary members. You know, basically, if you have a really high score, that could look great on a college application that you're like, oh, I was a National Merit Scholar finalist based on my PSAT scores. And then a few, and I really do mean like a very few, will actually get money, scholarship money for that. But truly, for the majority of most human beings, the PSAT is just to get you ready for the SAT, to give you a familiarity.
Okay, we have 2 questions about the timeline. So the first question was in regards to the timeline that you showed us, was that specifically in relation to the SAT test, or does it also apply to the ACT?
ACT as well, yes. So always make sure that you or your student have at least 8 weeks, ideally up to 12 weeks, to prepare for these tests. So you're looking at 2 to 3 months out before test date. So like, for example, the December test that's coming up, there's one on December 4th for SAT and December 11th for ACT. We've already taken our last students to prep for that because we are now down to like 6 weeks left until that test. So a couple of weeks ago, we closed out. We're like, these are the students who are prepping for December. Anyone who comes on board with us right now, they are prepping for the February ACT and the March SAT, because those are the next dates after that. And this is a great time for that, right? So they would have time to get started now. They'd have a few months to get them ready for the February and the March exams, and still have a little bit of a break for Christmas. So that's, you know, that's important to work in as well. But no, it absolutely, you need 8 to 12 weeks, and you kind of work backwards from whatever test date you're looking to take.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. So the next question is, can you explain super scoring?
Yeah, super scoring is the best gift that you get, okay? It is so wonderful that you can take these tests as many times as you want. And listen to me when I tell you this. Do not be afraid that you're like, oh, but I've already taken it like 4 times. Is this going to look bad to colleges? No, they are going to ask you for your super score or for your best SAT of all the ones you've taken. Listen, the colleges know that now a lot of students are starting to take their SAT and PSATs and ACTs in middle school. So of course, you're not going to hold that against you that you've taken it from like 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. It's fine. And I have friends who work on admissions councils, and they tell me, they're like, we get 40-something thousand applicants. Do you think we have time to go back through every single SAT or ACT they've ever taken? No, we look at the highlights. And what a super score is your highlight score for each section of the test. So when you take the ACT, for example, there are 4 sections. You can pick your very best. And when I say you can pick, the ACT already pulls it out for you. So they're like, oh, look, here's your super score. They pull out your best grammar, which is your English. They pull out your best math, your best science, and your best reading. And then that score averages to create your super score. And that is the highest that you've ever done if you put all your best days of testing together. Now, where that can be also an advantage, I had one student who just could not pass the math section with the score she wanted, or that would help get her elevated. So you know what she started doing? She started focusing just on math prep. And then when she went in for test day, she didn't even take the other sections. She sat there and bubbled B for all the other sections. So her scores looked like pathetic, right? Like they like 12 for this, 12 for that, or, 9. I don't know. She got like really low scores on those sections. And then her math score was like a 31, And what was great, she was like, I'm just trying to get my super score elevated. And it did not look bad to her colleges. They got it. They were like, we see you've taken it a few times and you just need that math score up. Good for you. You focused on your weakness. You got it up. Voila. She got loads of acceptance letters across the state of Florida. So super score is awesome. And by the way, the SAT does also do super score. They only have 2 sections. So they combine your best reading, writing, and your best math.
And then the next question that we have is about Bright Futures again, which will actually do a great segue into our next topic. So, is the Bright Futures for incoming freshmen to Florida University schools, or do the Florida colleges look at qualifying scores at any time in a college period? So, whether or not a student attends as a freshman or a junior college student?
I recently had to look this up for a student because she started her freshman year at SPC and wanted to try to go to FSU and use Bright Futures, but she didn't quite have the qualifying score. We looked into it, and because she was a student during COVID, the Bright Futures deadline was actually December of this year. So she's already started college, but she's now able to apply for Bright Futures. I'm giving you this as an example because that's not usually how it is. It's normally just for you normally have to, by the end of your senior year, the June test is usually the last SAT or ACT that will qualify you for Bright Futures. So because of COVID, they have really tried to be flexible about that, because what has happened is a few of the testing dates have gotten closed out and things like that. So, but yeah, usually it's just for freshmen, and you need to have it done by the end of your senior year.
Yes. And then if the question is, do community or state colleges accept the Bright Futures? Yes, they do.
Yes.
And then we have one more question, which is
about.
And
can I just actually tell you too? If you get Bright Futures, but you're still not going to the university that maybe you didn't get acceptance at, let's say University of Florida, and you're, darn it, I really want to be a Gator. I really wanted to, but I didn't get in there. Go to SPC, go to, if you, get into the community college. They're not called community college anymore, but state college. So go to a state college, complete your first 2 years there. Once you have that associate's degree, you can transfer in. You do have to have a nice GPA, so you have to keep your GPA nice, but they will accept you. So I have several students who are like, the only thing their eye was on was going to one particular college, and it was usually because of their football team. I'm not going to lie. And once they got into SPC, they finished out those first 2 years. They were able to do really small, intimate classes, save money by staying home, and then they transferred to their college and got right in and did their last 2 years as a Gator or as a Seminole or wherever they want to go.
Okay, and then we have one more question that just came in, which is, would you say that a school like MIT would place more emphasis on GPA accomplishments or the SAT/ACT? And I can answer this if you want.
I was going to say, I'll just tell you this real quick. GPA is king. GPA says a lot about the student. If a student has a really kind of lackluster GPA, that says a lot about that student's ability to, commit to things, to follow through, to really put their all in. Whereas they may just go in and take an SAT and get a high score, and it took very little commitment. So that's why GPA will always be king, but any quantitative number is going to really help with those upper level Ivy League schools. And the higher you get, those quantitative numbers are really important, because how else do they differentiate? I promise you, everyone who applies to MIT and all these other, big schools, they're in every club, they're the president of every club, they're in tons of sports. They have all the things, but they have to make sure they can differentiate themselves with top scores too.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with that. If you are looking at a specific school, something that you can do is if you Google search the school's name as well as the word admissions, it will usually take you to their admissions page. I don't know why I can't talk today. And on their page, it will kind of tell you what they're looking for. So it'll tell you, what the emphasis is on, whether it's GPA, whether it's their academics in class, whether it's a holistic review, which is okay, in addition to GPA and in addition to test scores, they may want a certain type of student. It will provide you with all that information. And thank you, Charlotte. She shared the MIT admissions website for you if you are looking for it.
Yeah, and if I may, I wanted to add one more thing with that. You can also email the MIT admissions counselors, which is the specific link I included, or call them as well if you just want to have a personal conversation and kind of get a feel for it as well. I've done that with every grad school I've looked into, like what do they consider the most, and that's just a great conversation to have with every school you're considering.
Thank you. Okay, if there are any additional questions, we are going to move on to our next section, but we will be answering more questions. So if anything else comes to mind, please don't hesitate to add it to the chat, or when the time arises for another Q&A portion, you can take yourself off mute and ask those questions as well. So now I'm going to turn it over to Sandy, who is going to talk to us a little bit more about scholarships like Bright Futures.
Awesome. Thank you. Everybody just take a deep breath in and out, because that was so much great information. I'm going to it was a good segue as well into our next section, which is going to focus on scholarships. A lot of people interested in the Bright Futures, I can see, so I'm going to touch on that, but I want you to know that Bright Futures isn't the only scholarship opportunity. So I definitely, a lot of students will tell me that they don't even start looking for scholarships until they're seniors. So I'm really happy that you're all joining us tonight, and hopefully after tonight, you will all start looking at scholarship opportunities as well. So the first question I get typically is, where do I start? And I'm a huge advocate of starting locally. Look at scholarship opportunities that are for a maybe smaller group, and specifically for scholarships for Pinellas County School students. So I definitely, I'm going to share some of these links with you, but the Pinellas County School website, and you can just Google Pinellas County School Scholarship or put in the pcsb.org/financial aid scholarship, is a great resource, and I'm going to show you the actual page, but it goes through many of the items that I'm going to bring up tonight, and they're direct links. So Pinellas County Schools does a great job of showing you what scholarships are out there. One of the key opportunities is the Pinellas Education Foundation Scholarship. Now, this one will be available to you next year. It is for seniors only, but you want to just be aware that it exists. This is a collection of, currently, I think it's 130 scholarships from various individuals and businesses throughout Pinellas County, and there is one application. So you complete this one application. It'll ask you a lot of questions about your family makeup, your hobbies, what you've been doing, your GPA, and then it will filter all the information to any scholarship that you may fit the criteria for. It's a great opportunity because, as I said, there's over 130 scholarships, and it is only for Pinellas County seniors. Some of those scholarships are for a specific school or perhaps band students or athletes. So this is really something you just want to make note of, and by next September, you want to be one of the first students to apply for that. So we mentioned Bright Futures a little bit, but I do want to just let you know that it is not the only scholarship that is offered by the state of Florida. Bright Futures is probably the most well-known, but if you go on the Florida Student Financial Aid website, and I think I have an extra G in there, sorry about that, it lists an entire list of the very specific scholarship offered to Florida residents. If you are going to apply for Bright Futures, you would set up a little account, but there are also many other scholarships available from the state of Florida. So now as far as Bright Futures, now Bright Futures is something that most students are working on throughout their 4 years in high school. But the actual application where you will create a student account opens October 1st of your senior year. So guidance counselors will constantly be reminding you that at that point you have to open an account, and then all of your academic information from your high school will be then fed into that account. So really, as a student, that is your task to do, is just create an account, and then your guidance counselors will feed in your scores and your GPA to Bright Futures. There are really 3 types of Bright Futures scholarships. There is the Florida Academic Scholars, and that is the one that's most well known to pay 100% of a Florida state tuition. The Florida Medallion Scholarship, which is 75% of a Florida in-state tuition. And then there are 2 different kinds of Gold Seal scholarships, and the Gold Seal scholarships require that your student has completed a series of career and technical education courses while in high school. So it may be digital design 1, 2, 3, and 4, or a vet tech program or something like that, a career and technical program, and you would have had to complete the entire series. There is specific coursework involved, and most of it is the same coursework that is required for graduation, with the exception of foreign language. You can actually graduate from high school without having 2 years of the same language, but Bright Futures requires it. And in general, it's just a good idea to have those 2 years of the same language in high school, because universities are going to look at that as well. There are certain GPAs that are required and scores, as Debbie was talking about, on the ACT or the SAT, and I'll pull up an example to be able to show that to you. Also, with each one of those scholarships, there's a certain number of community service hours that have to be completed. Now, keep in mind, these service hours have to be approved by your guidance counselor. So if you're already doing any volunteer work out in the community, you definitely need to just check with your guidance counselor and make sure it fits the criteria for Bright Futures. And they will give you a form that you can log all the hours. It does not have to be completed with one volunteer activity, but you do have to have each one of them approved by your guidance counselor. So I've had a lot of students that had hundreds of hours of community service that has accumulated, but they never connected with their guidance counselor. So you definitely want to do that as early as possible. Even though that application opens October 1st, you can have all the documentation for your community service hours prior to that. So you want to talk to your guidance counselor for that. You also want to research any connections that you have. When students talk to their family, their friends, and their neighbors, They may be surprised that their next door neighbor's employer offers a scholarship. Maybe mom or dad belong to a local organization and they have a scholarship. Maybe the store on the corner has a scholarship. So the more you just bring it up in discussions and talk to people, you'll be surprised how many just neighborhood scholarships may be available. So check with your employer, maybe your religious organization, if you belong to any clubs or community organizations, local banks and businesses. I know most of the local credit unions offer scholarships. So again, just bringing this up now, the sooner the better, you can start planning for any scholarships. There are many scholarships that are available to students well before their senior year. And we're going to share some of those with you tonight as well. Once you've covered all the local opportunities, then you want to start expanding your search as well. Now, College Board, the company that oversees the SATs that we've been talking about, has a collection of scholarships called Opportunity Scholarships. These started, I want to say maybe 2, maybe 3 years ago, and it's just a great idea. It's a collection of 7 scholarship opportunities, and every time you complete a step that helps you with your college planning, you can actually put your name in for a scholarship. So these steps include studying for the SAT, taking the SAT and then retaking the SAT, establishing a list of colleges that you're considering going, and then doing some research. So every one of these steps not only can establish you for a candidate for a scholarship, but it's also going to help you figure out that right college path for you, like Charlotte was saying at the beginning. So there's no application needed. You can just go online to cb.org/opportunity. And so as a junior, you will be able to actually start applying, I believe it's in January. So making that college list, studying for your SAT, taking an SAT or retaking the SAT can qualify you for one of 6 scholarships. And then the 7th scholarship, which is a $40,000 scholarship, is for students who have completed the first 6 steps. So that's a great place to go to not only plan out your future, but to apply for all 7 scholarships. There's also a scholarship called Raise Me, and you can go online, and this allows you to really create your own scholarship based on activities that you've been involved in. Raise Me is not accepted at all colleges, so you can go on the website and see which colleges it will apply to, but based on any activities or involvement or sports or volunteer activities that you've done, each one of those things could add to an ongoing scholarship. So definitely check out Raise Me, especially if you've been very involved in school. That can all pay off. Now, as you're looking at scholarships, you want to stay organized. You want to stay on top and realize who you've applied to, when you applied, what the deadline dates are. So whether you're old school and you want just a file and keep it organized, or if you set something up on your computer, you definitely want to list every scholarship opportunity that you come across. You want the email address to where you applied. You want to list the due date for when that scholarship application is due and the date that you actually sent it in. And then make a note of when the decision is going to be made, so you can go back and see if possibly you've gotten a scholarship. So I recommend that you make scholarship hunting maybe a part-time job. Once a month, put aside maybe 2 hours to just go through and look for scholarships. You'd be surprised how maybe 3 months in, you've maybe invested 6 hours of your time. Well, if that pays off to a $500 scholarship, then that's well worth the time you've invested in it. So again, just stay organized and stay on top of it. There will be new scholarship opportunities consistently through the next 2 years while you finish high school. And scholarship searches do not end once you're accepted into college. College students should keep that schedule and continue to look for scholarships every month and every year while they're in college, because those opportunities are going to grow as you accumulate credits and as you look at possibly in an even longer time in school. Perhaps you start with the thoughts of going for a bachelor's degree, and then you want to go on for a master's degree or a doctorate degree. So it's always a good idea to continue that scholarship search as you go through school. If you are accepted, don't leave it out. You definitely want to say thank you. You want to confirm all the details, and you want to read the fine print. You definitely want to know if this is a one-time scholarship or if it's a renewable scholarship. A lot of students just get really excited. They're awarded a certain sum of money, but they may not realize that this money is going to continue if you take a certain number of classes or if you consistently achieve a certain GPA. So you definitely want to make note of any conditions that go with the award. You want to say thank you. You want to send a thank you note. I know that sounds kind of old-fashioned, but it really means a lot. And as I said before, you don't want to stop looking. I'm going to go back and just show you some of, let's see, some details with the first page that I recommended to use. So I've got on the screen, this is the Pinellas County Schools Scholarship website. And if you note, the very first link on scholarship says scholarship opportunities. And this is a list of scholarships that Pinellas County Schools has vetted for you. So you know there's no scams or anything involved, and they update it every month. So as I open that, I want to show you it's really nicely laid out. So it has the grade that it's focused on. And I want to point out that anything that lists 12 plus means seniors or college students can apply. So if you bookmark the site, even when you're going to college, you can refer back to it. Now at this time of year, because mostly seniors are looking at this page, you're going to find most of the opportunities are saying 12th grade. But as you scroll down, here we go, Discover Card has a $5,000 scholarship that is open to 11th, 12th, and college students. So to find more details, you can just click on the link, but it'll show you right here that they're doing monthly drawings through the end of January. So that would be something that you could all apply to now. And then as we scroll down, the Innovation in Education Scholarship, that's offered from grades 9 through 12. So every high school student can apply for that. And again, there's a monthly drawing, but you have to apply by the 20th of every month. And then as I go through, as I said, this time of year, I find that majority of these are for seniors. Here's another one, United States Senate Youth Program, 11th and 12th grade, and so on. So this gets updated every month, and you'll find as the year goes through, you're going to find more and more opportunities for 11th graders, 10th graders, and 9th graders. Brooke Pear does a nice video on how to find scholarships as well, and that's listed on the Pinellas County Schools site. There's a direct link to Bright Futures, and it'll show you all of the details for Bright Futures. One of the links on Bright Futures is this Bright Futures Handbook. Everything you ever wanted to know about Bright Futures and everything that you didn't. But there are a lot of complicated questions. Perhaps your student is in a special program like an ACE program or something like that. There are other ways that certain students meet the qualifications for Bright Futures. So as you go by, you can see the basic requirements here. So excuse me. So the Florida Scholars Scholarship requires the same classes as the Florida Medallion. You'll see you need 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 3 of a natural science, 3 of social science, and 2 of world languages. So whether you're looking at the academic scholar or the medallion scholarship, you would need all of those classes. For the scholars, which it pays out the 100% of in-state tuition, GPA is 3.5 minimum. And then for the medallion, it is 3.0 minimum. For 2021-2022 graduates, they're looking for a 29 combined score on the ACT, or as Debbie said, a 1330 on the SAT. For the 75%, it's 25 on the ACT or a 1210 on the SAT. And then for service hours, we're looking at 100 hours completed and approved and documented for the 100% scholarship and 75 for, excuse me, the medallion. But you can see, you know, the handbook goes into college entrance exams. It gives you detail about the service hours. If you are a National Merit Scholar, if you've taken part of an ACE diploma, which is a specialized program that certain schools offer. So if you have any very specific questions, I definitely recommend going and reading through the handbook. And also I recommend staying in, you know, constantly looking at the website. When COVID hit and we were all locked down, there were so many questions because a lot of the SAT and ACT testing was canceled. And so students really had a lot of questions about how they could submit another score. A lot of students waited till their senior year to take their test. And so when the tests weren't available anymore, they were just in a really tough spot. So I highly recommend definitely taking it now as a junior and then staying abreast of any changes through the Bright Futures website. There's also a direct link to the Florida Grant and Scholarship programs. And as I said, that covers more than just the Bright Futures Scholarship. And then, of course, Fafsa. We touched a little bit on Fafsa, but because of a conversation I had this morning, I just do want to stress that every senior should complete a Fafsa application. I talked with a dad this morning, and he assured me that due to he had a 2-income family and he felt that they just would not qualify for anything from the federal government. He was not aware that there are many other scholarship opportunities that just require that you've completed your FAFSA application. So those of you that may not know, FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Students apply with their parents and they complete tax information for 2 years prior to the year that they plan on attending school. And a FAFSA is completed each and every year that your student will be attending college. But as I said, even if there is not funding from the federal government directly, it can open the door to many other opportunities. I also just want to share that there are many different kinds of scholarships. Merit scholarships are based on basically your academic level. So it could be your GPA or your ACT score or your SAT score. There are income-based scholarships. So that would be based on the amount of income that comes into the family. But then there are also many other scholarships that are based on whatever that donor would like it to be. So perhaps your student is interested in nursing. There may be scholarships just for students that are planning to be a nurse. Each institution that you apply for will have individual scholarships from that institution. Now, those scholarships typically you cannot apply for until you've been accepted into that school, but know that that's a whole nother resource for scholarships. So I always recommend to apply early. Always meet the deadlines, because that is the first thing that will eliminate you from getting a scholarship is if you apply late. So applying early, keeping track of all the scholarships that you apply for, and continually bringing it up in conversations. As I said, you'd be surprised how many businesses or organizations do offer scholarships, but really don't know how to promote it. So talk to your family, talk to your friends about scholarship opportunities, and definitely start now. And I will hand it back to Danica. Does anybody have any questions about scholarships? No? So I will hand it over to you.
Okay. So I am going to wrap up today's workshop. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the PATH program and what we do, as well as some tips to consider as you are making your way through your junior year, either as a high school student or as a parent. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So a little bit about the PATH program. Our mission is to help provide equitable, flexible, and attainable pathways to promote higher education to all students in Pinellas County. It's important to note that we are a collaborative partnership between the University of South Florida St. Petersburg campus as well as St. Petersburg College. And our vision is just to increase the number of students who are attaining post-secondary degrees and credentials within Pinellas County. We want to make sure that we are creating a healthy economic mobility and pathways for students here in Pinellas County. And there are a few ways that we do that. So as the PATH program, we are a resource. We provide college access information regardless of intended college. So if you are ever interested in having an individual conversation with us, we are able to schedule those with you. We also work within the schools. So we all partner with college and career centers across Pinellas County. So if you go to Gibbs, Lakewood, Boca Ciega, Pinellas Park, Seminole, Clearwater, Eastlake, and Largo, you may come across a PATH counselor. We are also in AVID classes every so often. If they ask, we will go out and do presentations. So there is a possibility that you may have seen us in a class before. In addition to the work that we do around college access information, we also offer a 2+2 program. So in this program, we help students who are interested in starting at SPC and they want to specifically transfer to the University of South Florida St. Petersburg campus. Through that program, we give them individualized support. So we meet with our students on a regular basis to make sure they have the resources to be successful as college students. We also offer them workshops throughout the semester. And then as 2+2 students, they are eligible for one of two scholarships at USF St. Pete campus. And then we also offer a book scholarship for our students who are currently at SPC. And then a little bit about some of the things that you want to consider as a high school junior. And some of this information will have come from other topics that we discussed tonight, but it's never a bad idea to reiterate the important information. So first, again, take the SAT or the ACT. Here are some upcoming deadlines for the both of them. So if you're interested in the ACT, the next one will be December 11th. Then there's a February 12th date, there is an April 2nd, a June 11th, and then July 16th. And then if you're interested in the SAT, there is a December 4th test, a March 12th test, a May 7th test, and a June 4th test. You can check with your guidance counselor. There are students who may be eligible for fee waivers. We highly recommend that if you can get a fee waiver, by all means get a fee waiver. That's less money out of your pocket and it's free. And there are specific deadlines that go with each of these test dates, so be aware of what is the deadline for the test that you're interested in taking so that you don't have to pay any necessary late fees. And then the next thing that we want to talk about is just some other things to consider. Yes.
Back to those dates.
Yes.
How do we know? So if we want our child to attend the ACT or the SAT on one of those dates, do we go to their guidance counselor at the school to apply for it, or do they get something that triggers them and says, hey, this is coming up?
No, they would have to go to the actual test website themselves. Some schools will have it listed for them, but if it's not a school, So schools will offer
Oh.
the SAT test specifically, and on that, for those tests, the school will let you know that, hey, you'll be taking the SAT at the high school, and they'll prepare them for that. If it is a test that they're taking outside of school, your student will have to take the responsibility of registering for that test on the test's website, and they'll let you know the deadline's there.
Okay, those dates that you showed are to test online.
Yeah, well,
Right.
not online, but outside of school, yes.
Okay, because yeah, I was talking with my daughter, and she said that the SAT and ACT you don't take until you're a senior. But this is why I'm trying to prepare her now, and this is why we're on here as juniors, and we reiterate like it's important to prepare. But then I'm hearing, well, they can't take these tests till senior, so I kind of feel a little stuck if we can't.
You can take them now. We highly recommend. So to go back to what Debbie said, it's in your student's best interest to take it as a junior. Part of that reason why is we want them to have the best scores possible. So if
Yeah.
they wait until they're a senior, that limits the amount of time that they have to, one, get the
Yeah.
test, and then two, retest. So if
Exactly.
you know the information, you can retest when needed. It gives you a larger window to say, hey, I didn't get the score that I needed. Let me
Yeah.
get some more prep in. So yes, definitely
But
take
it's
it as a
interesting
junior.
that the school that they go to don't offer it until their senior year. So it's up to us. So we have to take the control and the accountability, right? Is what you're saying is
I just wanted to mention real quick. So the school does offer it. I'm not sure which school does your son or daughter go to?
Countryside.
Yep. So they'll offer it in March to all juniors. And so
March, okay.
every junior in Pinellas County Public Schools will take it in March, and it'll be part of their school day. And for that one, actually, your daughter won't have to register. That one is done like through the school. Every junior is going to be like, come to the cafeteria, or whatever. They're going to like get them ready for it. But the other test dates that are given on Saturdays, so like the one that is going to be given at Countryside will be like on a Wednesday or something. But the ones that are given on the weekends, those are the ones that are on the SAT website and the ACT website, and those you do have to sign up for on the website. But here's the thing, it'll still be at your daughter's school likely. Like you can choose from a drop-down list that'll say, I would like to test at Countryside High, and if that's one of the eligible schools, your daughter can take it there, but it's not being given by the school. You know what I mean? Like it's being,
Yeah.
So.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you so much. So March, I'll be
And so she should start prepping like in December or January at the latest for the March exam.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So some more information that your students should be considering right now while they're a junior is one, to keep a record of their accomplishments, their activities, and their work experience. You can call it a resume, you can call it I think it's sometimes called like a praise sheet, whatever you want to call it. It makes it very easy for your students to be, or you as a student, to be aware of what you've accomplished throughout your high school experience. This is very useful for when you are going after scholarships, because then you have one page that you can look at to refer back to if they're asking you about your experiences outside of your high school classes. It also helps if you are being asked to have someone write a letter of recommendation for you. I always say that the people that you know usually know you in one capacity. So if they're your teacher, they probably know what you're like in the classroom. They may not be as aware of what you do outside of class. So it helps them to write a very well-rounded letter for you, so they can touch on the other aspects of your life that you want to highlight. So make sure that you're creating that cheat sheet now. Again, you can do it as a senior, but the farther you get into school and the more things that you start to accomplish, it gets really hard to look back on and understand, what did you do in your freshman year versus what did you do in your sophomore year. The next thing is, as we've already discussed with scholarships, take the time to start researching those financial aid resources and opportunities. So like Shandy showed you, there are some opportunities that are available for you right now as a high school junior. So look into more of those options. And then even if you see things that aren't going to be available until next year, it does not hurt to take down, what is that scholarship? When will it be open? What is the deadline and what are the requirements? Because usually these scholarships operate on a cyclical basis. So it means that if it opens, in January of this year, it's probably going to open January of next year as well. So if you know that in advance, it makes it very easy for you to keep track of that and be prepared when it does open, so that you can put your best foot forward to get the scholarships that are available to you. Get involved. That goes without saying. If you're not currently involved, it never hurts to find a club, find an activity, find a sport that is of interest to you, and just be a well-rounded student. Get involved, whether it's through civic engagement, through your school, through your religious organizations. Find some things that are fun for you to do. And then maintain your GPA. I have to tell a lot of students that the idea of senioritis does not work. You cannot have really great grades, 9th grade through 11th grade, and think that you can slack your senior year. Unfortunately, colleges don't have that approach. They're going to look at all of your grades. Something to note as a junior is that when you apply, you will be applying to colleges, especially four-year universities, at the beginning of your senior year. So that means that you will not have grades yet for your senior year. They will only be looking at your 9th through 11th grade grades. But that senior year becomes very important because at the end of your school year, you are going to have to turn in an official transcript. And the colleges will review that transcript. And if they feel that your senior grades are not up to par, they can actually take back their application decision. So they could say, you're at the beginning of your senior year, congratulations, welcome to our university, and then they can rescind it at the end of your senior year. And nobody wants that. We want to get into the schools of our choice, and we want to stay accepted in the schools of our choice. So just make sure that you're taking your grades seriously. Study if you're not currently studying. Create time management skills, all the habits that are going to be important for you to be a successful junior, senior, and as well as a college student. And then when possible, take rigorous classes. So those types of classes would be dual enrollment, which is when you are taking college level classes as a high school student. You can also take advanced placement classes. These are classes where you're taking it as a high school student and it does not currently count for college credit, but once you complete the advanced placement test at the end of it, that can be considered for college credit when you actually apply to college. And then honors classes, which are just advanced high school classes. When we talk about college admissions, it's important to take these classes because one, it shows that you are challenging yourself, that not only can you do well in high school level classes, but you can also do well in college level classes. But for two, when colleges are looking at your test, well, at your GPAs, they're going to give you higher points for these advanced placement classes, dual enrollment classes, and honors classes. So for example, if you get an A in a average high school class, that is a 4.0 or a 4. If you do honors, that 4 becomes a 4.5. If you do dual enrollment or AP classes, that 4 becomes a 5. So it automatically is taking your GPA up in a way that is very beneficial to you. The only thing that I always caution is that if you know that you are not going to take the time necessary to study or take it seriously, do not do it, especially when we talk about dual enrollment classes. The reason for that is when you start taking dual enrollment, you are officially creating your college transcript. That means if you only take one dual enrollment class and you fail that dual enrollment class, you now have a 0.0 college GPA. They're going to factor that in when you apply for college, and they're going to say, hey, this person has a really bad college GPA. We even may not be able to accept you. So you have to take those classes extremely seriously. You have to be very aware of what's happening in those classes and make sure that you're going to put your best foot forward. Because if you're not going to put your best foot forward, don't do it. Because it will eventually, if you don't, it's going to be more harm than good.
To that same end, I was actually just going to say to that same end that most students who do qualify to even be eligible to enroll in a dual enrollment class are typically the type that are going to put their best foot forward. And so I've had a lot of students ask me, like, should I do AP version of this class or should I do the college dual enrollment version? I'm like, listen, if you're planning on taking it seriously, which again, most of these students are, then college dual enrollment is going to be a guaranteed credit if you get an A or a B or, whatever. But AP, I've seen many students get straight A's in their AP class and still get 0 college credit because they failed the test. Mm-hmm. And by failed, I don't mean there's not really, like that word is so heavy, but just like they didn't get the eligible number that you need. So some of them require you to have a 3 or higher, some require a 4 or higher, or 5 or higher to get college credit, and they are rigorous. Like, I'm not playing around. Like those AP tests, that's a hard test, okay? Like SAT and ACT are child's play compared to a lot of those AP tests, okay? So just think about that, because the dual enrollment is guaranteed. You get the college credit, you have your A or B, and it's great. You get an A or B in AP and you don't pass the test, that was a fun class that you have. That's, it's on your high school transcript, but it doesn't help you for college.
Yes. Thank you. And then also some things to consider with dual enrollment is if you are trying to save money, dual enrollment is a great way to save money because those classes are free. So you are getting free college credits. The more you take, again, as long as you're planning to do well in them, the more you can get under your belt that you don't have to pay for. Pinellas County Schools will pay for that for you, as well as the books, if I'm not mistaken. And then going back to what Charlotte mentioned around college types and fits, now is a great time, if you have not already started to do so, to begin creating your college list. So now is the time to kind of start to dwindle down. We have a lot of colleges in the country of United States. There are a lot of colleges in the state of Florida. All these colleges offer similar things. They also offer different things. So to begin understanding what is the experience that you want, what is the type of college that is the best fit for you. So again, going back to what she mentioned, consider what is the location, what are the majors offered. And then as you create that list, understand what is the GPA needed and what are the test scores needed. What are their averages for the last 2 years? They will share that information with you. If you're interested in any specific school, if you Google search the school's name and admissions, it will show you what are the types of students that they previously admitted, what are the things that they consider when they are choosing those students. I feel like I had something else. Okay, and then also, as you're looking at colleges, understand the deadlines, because again, while you may not be applying now, you will be applying soon. So for example, we've all mentioned, Sandy and I work for the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg campus. The USF application opens July 1. So before you start high school as a senior, you can apply for college. Know that. It's also important to know, because we talk to admissions recruiters on a very regular basis, to apply early. So if you are considering the schools that, you know that what your top 5 schools are, if they open on July 1 and you have all the things needed, apply on July 1. If there's nothing to wait for, don't wait. And then review the college application materials. So make sure that you understand before you apply, what are the things that will be needed? Because like I said, USF opens July 1. If you are interested in USF, we do not require an essay. We don't require any letters of recommendation. However, there are schools that do. So if you're going to be applying to a college that does require letters of recommendations and you plan to apply during the summer, it would be helpful if you know who you're asking to write those letters for you. So that way they know in advance that they need to be done. They know what they're writing for you and all that information as well. And then something that's very important is to have these conversations. If you're a parent, sit down with your students and ask them, what are their plans for college? Where do they want to go to college? If you're a student, talk to your parents about your decisions about where you're going to college and what you want out of your college experience. I say that because you will be surprised at the number of people who don't have those conversations and just assume that, well, my parent or my child knows what I want them to do or what I want to do. And that's not always the case. And then you also need to be very specific around those conversations. So talk about distance. If you're planning to go out of state, how far are you planning to go? If you're a parent and you're wanting to talk to your child about college, how far are you comfortable with them going? You can't just say, I want you to go far, but not too far. I actually had this conversation as somebody who works in college access. My cousin, her daughter is now a junior, so we're getting really close to the time to have this conversation again, but she was a freshman at the time. And she said, oh, she can go far, but not too far. And I told her, okay, well, I'm a college educated adult. I don't know what that means, because my far but not too far is I moved from Ohio to Florida. Your far but not too far could be in Ohio, you live in Cleveland, she can go to Columbus. Those are not the same distances. So if you don't be very clear about, okay, well, you can stay in the state of Florida and maybe you can go to Miami as the furthest distance, or you can go to Jacksonville as the furthest distance, or we have family in Georgia, you can go to Georgia. You have to be very clear about those expectations. And the sooner you're clear about those expectations, the sooner you all can be on the same page. Finances is also very important. Understand if there is money that is going to be given to your student, or if you as a student think that your parents are going to be paying for certain things, understand what those payments look like. Can we afford full tuition out of our pockets? Can we afford room and board out of our pockets? Am I paying for your textbooks out of pocket? Am I not able to give you anything out of pocket? That makes it very easy for students to understand how much money do I need to bring to the table, either in scholarships, have a conversation around loans, and understanding if that's what you all want to do. But be very clear. College conversations, there's no place for vagueness, because a lot can be read in between the lines, and there can be a lot that is misconstrued. So now's the time to have those conversations. Okay.
Tanika, we have a question for you.
Okay, sorry. I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah, and it's very important information. So I agree 100%. So we have a question. What if a child doesn't have all volunteer hours prior to applying to college? So this popped up when you were talking about that July 1st date. I can take it if you
volunteer
want.
hours are usually in relation to scholarships. So I know, for example, Bright Futures has a scholarship requirement for volunteer hours. Usually when it comes to applying for colleges, they're not necessarily looking for a certain number of hours. They're more so, if they're asking you about volunteer experiences, they want to know, what did you get out of the experience? What was substantial about it versus how many hours did you complete at that location? And then also, it's important to note that when you are applying to a college, especially if you apply early, there are ways to update your your information. So if they are asking for specific volunteer hours, that may not mean that you need to have them by the time that you apply. You can update that throughout. So going back to the idea of test scores as well, just because you apply with a certain type of test scores does not mean that you cannot update those test scores later. So it's not set in stone usually for a while, especially if we're talking about applying in July or applying at the beginning of the school year. You have some time to make some adjustments, usually by whatever the predetermined deadline is. And then these are our lovely faces. So you've met myself as well as Sandy. There's also Charlene Ajman. She is currently out doing a FAFSA night at a high school, so that's why she cannot be with us today. But if you're ever interested in getting in contact with us, these are our phone numbers as well as our email addresses. And then we also have our website. So there's some information about checklists, some ways that we are out in the community. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram page. Instagram and Facebook, we post weekly on Thursdays, different scholarship opportunities that are available. So again, I think a lot of them are geared towards seniors, but it does not hurt as a junior to know, okay, this is when the Pinellas Education Foundation opened their scholarship, or this is when this scholarship became available, because that lets you prepare in advance. Because what we don't want to happen next year is that you say, oh, wait, I remember that scholarship, but the deadline passed. And that is pretty much all from me. We ask that you stay for a few moments to take our survey. This lets us know how we did, how we can improve. We always want to make sure that we're able to provide information to you all. We will continue to do these workshops throughout the rest of this year. So you may see some more things coming from us. I know next semester we'll be going into specific topics. So next semester we will have a workshop specifically on scholarships and financial aid. We will have a workshop specifically on the SAT and the ACT. We just want to make sure that as you're going through your junior year, you have a lot of this information available to you now, and not just waiting until next semester, because the sooner you know, the better you can start. And I'm also going to put this survey in the chat, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Nope, that is our lovely logo. And, oh, Debbie, there is a question for you. Can you please provide the link to your tutoring course and cost?
Yes, absolutely. I can put that in the chat so that you guys will have that.
Okay, and I'm adding our survey. And we can also continue to take questions. So if there are any other questions, please don't hesitate to ask us.
Will you be sharing this presentation, or at least the last slide you had, with your contact information?
Yes, I will. So this presentation is being recorded. So once we have it up, we will put it on YouTube, and I'll also send you an email with the link to the presentation, as well as all of the links that we've included in the chat today.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem. Okay, well, we are in about 10 minutes early. Oh, wait, there are more questions. Oh, thank you so much, Kelly. Yes, we will be emailing this to the email that you provided when you signed up. If for some reason you would like to be sent to a different email, just respond to the email that you got the link from, and I'll be happy to send it to you in whichever email works best for you. And then Debbie has included her prices as well as more information in the chat.
Yeah, I don't know if we were waiting for any other questions to come in, but I just want to say one more time that, like, you're already doing such good things for your kiddos, or for yourself if you are the kiddo, by being on a call like this, because I work with so many seniors who say, if I had only started this as a junior, God, if I had only started as a junior, I would have had so much more time. And when it comes to SAT and ACT, your mind is better equipped to handle the SAT and ACT as a junior. All of the math is so much fresher for what you're actually going to be tested on. This is the time to do it, and to do it in a stress-free and sort of environment. So, you know, if you decide to do test prep through like a test prep provider, it's an investment, but it's an investment that will pay you back like at least sixfold for sure, because getting those full rides to college and all that scholarship money, they love to see a really nice SAT or ACT score, and it feels good to put it down there. Plus, I mean, a lot of students tell me they're like, I just feel better, like I know how to write better after I finish the course. Like I feel more equipped for knowing how to handle grammar and doing math problems, just because you kind of don't realize how much you've forgotten. So
I also echo the sentiment of a stress-free environment. It can be very stressful if you're a senior and you have to retest and you have a limited window of when you can retest. So the sooner you can start the process of taking tests and knowing what your score is, the better. And then I also want to go back to, there was a mention of the PSAT. If you are interested in Khan Academy, you can link your PSAT scores to Khan Academy, and they can give you a diagnostic test based on the PSAT as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and the volunteer hours, don't wait on those either. Start now.
Yeah, I agree. We are out in the schools working with a lot of seniors now. Mm-hmm. And first of all, everybody's amazed that it's already the end of October, and your senior year only gets faster and faster. Mm-hmm. And so it does make it very stressful. Not so bad if you just have like one retest to do, but if you're just starting this process as a senior, it does make it a really stressful situation.
Yeah. And there's so many students who are already getting their college acceptance letters right now, and other seniors who haven't even begun to take their first SAT. So the difference in where those students are in terms of like, I can just focus on getting my pictures taken and attending homecoming and doing those sort of things instead of like college essays. And and if you are going like Ivy League, let me tell you, it's not just one essay. You have to sometimes write like 5 or 6 different essays. I was working with a student the other day on some like Princeton questionnaires and whatnot, and it was like, whew, can be a lot.
Gary, the link to the survey is in the chat. Danica posted it. If you just click on that link, it'll bring you to the survey, and we really appreciate you completing it. It helps us know which topics were well received, or if we missed any information. We're constantly retooling and trying to get the information out to everyone.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to give a shout out to Debbie and to Charlie. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm always happy to see the both of you. You bring so much information, so much happiness to our workshop. So I'm always happy. Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to support you guys.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's always fun to be here.
Thank you. That was very informative. I have a question for Debbie. I really like your organizational skills behind you. Is this a closet, or is this a space that you made in your home? I really love it.
This is my my home office. It's a little room. I do have a really messy closet over here, but
no, it still looks pretty put together. But yeah, I just like all the bins. I've been like looking at that, going, wow, I need to get something.
IKEA is the best.
Yes, it is. IKEA, yes.
It really is. It really does keep things very, very organized for me, though, because we have just loads of SAT materials and whatnot.
Everything.
Easily get my hands on. So.
Yeah, very nice. I like it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
We do have another question. Do you have specific people for the letters of recommendation? I was going to type in the chat, but it just makes sense to say it out loud. So we highly recommend that you utilize teachers, guidance counselors. If your student has a good relationship with like their assistant principal or the principal, that's not a bad idea either. But also if they're involved, so like let's say they volunteer regularly, they're in any organizations, if those organization leaders can talk about your student, that is not a bad idea either. So any person who is connected to your student either through academics or their extracurricular activities, those would be people that could write great letters of recommendations for your students.
I would just repeat what you said earlier, though, Danica. If you write up a simple personal resume, the things you've been involved in, places you've volunteered, any awards that you've been given, and you share that with the person that you're asking for the recommendation letter, there's a good chance they don't know everything about you. So that'll help them create a much thorough recommendation letter.
Then the question is, would my basketball coach be a good letter of recommendation? Yes, your basketball coach would be a great letter of recommendation, especially because your basketball coach can speak to your the time that you've been on the team. They can also talk about your experience being a team member, which we don't always think about, but that is a very great thing to talk about in college letters of recommendation. And then if possible, they can talk about your academic rigor. So I highly recommend that you reach out to your coach. Are there any other questions that we can answer? We are here until 8 o'clock.
Yeah. This is our day job, so, and now night job too. But like, you're like passionate about this. Like, I could talk about college admissions and SAT and ACT, just bright futures. I just love it. Actually, it becomes like a funny joke in our house that when I talk about something, I'll be like, don't tell me that was probably an SAT essay that you read recently or something. Like, yes. It's funny. It just becomes your whole like life gets kind of consumed. But
yes, and we recognize that this is a lot of information. As I mentioned before, this is not the only time we have these conversations. So we will be doing more workshops. So the next few will be geared towards sophomores and freshmen, but next semester there will be more workshops based on specific topics like financial aid and the SAT and the ACT. And then we'll also have another junior workshop towards the end of next year that kind of goes back into, hey, you're almost a senior. Now let's start to talk about the things that will be coming up very soon. So don't feel that you have to have all this information today and that we'll never bring this back up, because we're always talking about college access and college admissions. And again, if you're ever interested, you can reach out to us individually. Like I said, I will share more information about how you can get in contact with PATH counselors when I send out the email. That will wrap up our workshop for tonight. You'll probably get it either by the end of this week, if at the very latest at the beginning of next week. There is a question, Debbie, for you of can you give your phone number if possible?
Oh, sure, of course. It is 727, I'm putting in the chat too, 393-8799. And that's also a great number to text, because I am teaching, like normally I'm teaching at this time tonight. But I cleared my calendar and told my students that I was like, I have another engagement. So we had to move things around. But like, text me and we'll set up a time that we can talk, because it's really difficult. I teach usually somewhere between 8 to 10 hours a day I teach. So it's a lot. But I'm really, really good with getting back with you to set up a time to talk, or we can talk via text or via email. So I put that in there too. But yeah, I just can't stress enough, like, that the fact that you're thinking about this now and you're asking people who know this as their day job is important, because we hear a lot of information from people that are like, well, my neighbor said that we don't need to even worry about that. Until I'm like, is your neighbor in college admissions? Okay, because like, I promise you, when your son or daughter says, oh, I don't need to worry about it until then, find out from like a counselor or their teachers or somebody who really does this as their day job, because your child has a lot of other competing priorities in their life, and knowing all the ins and outs of the SAT or of college admissions is not their like best, highest knowledge area. So definitely, like, it's so great that you're on these calls and find out all the information from people who, like, again, we live and breathe it. We can answer these questions for you, and you shouldn't feel very like, don't feel nervous going into it. You have a team of people. I know everybody on here will answer your emails so fast too. So like, if you have questions, definitely reach out.
Also, it's important to note in relation to the college testing, that the state of Florida has not waived college tests as part of the application process. Other states may have. So you still need to take a college admissions test if you are planning to go to a four-year university in the state of Florida. We get that question a lot too.
And definitely if you want money. Yep.
No problem. Thank you.
I'm overwhelmed, but thank you. Oh, I know it's a lot. It's such a lot. Oh, by the way, too, when people ask me, well, when should we prep? I always say when you have the most time. And that's why you need to really think too, like if you are the student or if you are the parent of the student, you need to think like, you know, getting them involved in doing SAT prep or ACT prep when they have like dance every day from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. and then competitions on the weekends. That's the worst time. So you need to like find a time when they have, it's a minimum of 4 hours a week because you have to do that. That only gives you an hour per subject area for the week, you know? So 4 hours a week is minimum. And then they have practice tests on the weekends. It's a time investment. So like, that's a question that comes up a lot too. Like, when should I prep? When you have time. So it could be that the summer is best, but also for some of you, the summer is the worst. So.
Okay, I think I'm going to stop the recording if that's okay.
Yes. Thank you.